Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Welcome to the session, Recovery with Food, What to Feed Your Child for Better Health. My name is Mu'min Abdullah, and I would like to welcome you to the session. And I hope that you benefit from this session and that you've benefited from all the previous sessions that you've watched so far, and that this is a continuation of your journey to living a more holistic life and with a better diet and better lifestyle. What we'll discuss: the goal, what healing with food does, food types, what to eat and what not to eat, the GAPS diet, understanding how the diet works, and reminders, things to consider when starting the diet. Now, if you've watched one of the previous sessions, you will know that we discussed that in healing, we have three objectives. We have three goals in mind. And when we're to recover with food, those same goals still apply. So the first goal is preservation, and that is to preserve what we already have of good health. And when we introduce healing with foods, and that includes changing our diet, first thing we'll do is provide the body with the nourishment it needs to grow cells in the gut lining. Because oftentimes when we have these illnesses that show up in our children, it is because they have a compromised gut. It's also called leaky gut. And this is when essentially there are gaps in the gut lining, and therefore undigested food leaks out into the bloodstream. And this causes a lot of problems in the body, things like allergies, eczema, asthma, and it also causes neurological issues as well. So the first thing we want to do is to provide the body with the nourishment it needs to fill these gaps, to close the gaps and seal the gut, and also repopulate the gut lining, repopulate the gut flora. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So the first thing is preservation. The next goal is protection. You want to remove what will harm the body and cause poor health, including foods that are problematic when healing. So for people who have gut issues or leaky gut, there are a number of foods that can be problematic. Many of those foods have already been outlined. And when you take these foods out, you immediately see a change in the child, and you start to see a recovery process happen. It happens at different speeds for different children, and depending on how far along their condition is. But when you remove these foods, you give the body a chance to start to recover. The third goal is extraction. And this is where you want to remove toxins that are in the body through strengthening the detoxification pathways in the body. So here, if we have toxins or chemicals or harmful elements in our bodies or in the child's body, you want to remove those. We don't want to um, have a conflict where the body is full of harmful elements while we're trying to heal. So at the same time as building up the strength of the body, we're also going to be removing the toxins and the things that are building up in the body that can be causing harm or causing the child not to be able to heal. So when choosing foods to include in your diet, there are some things that we need to consider. We want to select the best quality food that we have access to. Of course, that we all have different needs. We all have different limitations. We live in different parts of the world, so some things might be easily accessible where other things may not be. So this is just a general guideline that when you're looking for foods to include in your diet, try to get the best. If you can get these, do so. If not, Alhamdulillah, we're going to work with what we have access to. So with meat, you want to go with grass-fed and free range. Grass-fed would be in reference to beef, lamb, sheep, and those kinds of red meats. And free range would be in reference to poultry. And the reason we're looking for this is because this is most natural way that the animal eats. It also produces the nutrients in the meats that we need for healing. Now, again, this is if you're able to, and we'll talk about when you're not able to. But this is something that we're looking for. Okay? This would be what we would consider ideal. So, ideally, you want grass fed meat and free range poultry. For produce, you want it to be organic and local. Organic because a lot of the produce that are in the market these days are sprayed with chemicals, pesticides, herbicides that are shown to be very harmful to the human body. If we can avoid these, then we want to do so. So, again, this is an ideal situation if you have access to and are able to get produce that is organic and local. That would be the way to go. And oils, your oils, and this is would be plant-based oils like seed oils. You want them to be cold pressed, and that's because we don't want oils that are extracted through heating because we don't want it to be old or rancid. Okay, so when you're looking for your olive oils, for example, look for cold pressed oil. Okay. So types of foods to eat. These are the foods that you want to include in your child's diet. If you don't have these foods in your child's diet, try to go ahead and include them as soon as possible. Okay, these are the foods that are nutrient dense that help the body build and recover. Okay, so include these in your diet. Meat stock or broth, and this is a stock made from meat and bone. So you take bones and meat and you boil it to make what we call a stock or a broth. And what happens is the nutrients from the bone and the meat come out into the water, and this becomes a food that is very easy to digest. Okay, so this is one of the things that we want to include. It also helps to rebuild the gut lining. So it's very important for children who have an impaired digestive system or they have leaky gut to have meat stock and broth. Now, if you're just starting out, you don't want to start with bone broth. It is very nutritious, but when you're starting out, you don't want to start off with bone broth that's made with solely with bones and no meat. You want to start off with a meat stock. So you would boil meat with bones, or let's say take a whole chicken and you would boil that and make your stock. Animal fat. And this is fats that come from animal sources. So your butter, ghee, tallow, and that's usually beef fat, but it can also be lamb fat or goat fat, uh, duck fat, chicken fat. So all types of fats that comes from animals, very nutritious to have in your child's diet. Eggs, eggs are nutrient dense food as well. So you would want to include eggs if it's tolerated. A lot of children who have leaky gut may also be allergic to eggs. So if you know that your child has a sensitivity or an allergy to eggs, don't include that. But otherwise, if your child can tolerate eggs, include eggs. Meats of all kinds. So all kinds of meat that you have access to, include that in the diet. There's no prescription on how much, but your child should be eating meat. Fresh vegetables, and this is fresh as you can get it. So some of the freshest vegetables that you can have is that the ones that you grow yourself. But otherwise, fresh vegetables should be included in the diet. Ferments, and these are probiotic rich foods. Um, they, these are foods that have gone through a specific process to grow beneficial bacteria that can be consumed and repopulate the the bacteria that should be in our guts. One of the easiest ways to do that, or one of the easiest ferments to get access to, is apple cider vinegar. So if you're thinking like, what can I include right now in my child's diet? Apple cider vinegar be one of those ferments, but also yogurt, sour cream, kefir. So if you have access to any of these, include them in your child's diet. This will also include sauerkraut. Honey. Honey is beneficial, very beneficial in the diet. It is antibacterial, antifungal. It's not consumed by fungus in the gut. So use this in your child's diet. You could use it in teas, for example, to sweeten teas, possibly drizzled over other types of food that they may be eating. So include honey regularly in your child's diet. Natural salt. This could be Celtic, Himalayan, or sea salt. So you want to start using salt that come from the earth. Raw milk. And this is milk that's essentially straight from the animal. It could be cow milk, it could be goat milk, as long as your child tolerates those. Include this in your child's diet because it is very nourishing. It has the enzymes that aid in digestion, and there's been a lot of research lately on the benefits of raw milk. Raw milk meaning it is unpasteurized, unheated, and the natural enzymes and bacteria that's in it has not been removed. Seeds and nuts. So we want to include seeds and nuts. If you have a child that does not tolerate nuts or is allergic to nuts, of course, you don't want to give them the nuts or the seeds. But if your child can tolerate it, include seeds and nuts. Now, when you learn more about the GAPS diet, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on, you'll find that for seeds and nuts, you will need to go through some type of processing. You need to soak them before you eat them. That is ideal. So ideally, you want to soak your nuts and your seeds before you consume them because they become easier to digest. But in a general sense, seeds and nuts are also beneficial to have in your diet. So this list is a list that you can refer to if you're just starting out. If you have not attempted to do any type of healing diet, or you are now really thinking about how can I start eating better? How can I get my child to eat better? Start with introducing these items, especially if they're not in your diet already. If they're not in your diet, so these are the things you want to start introducing. So as a base, like a baseline, you would use this list to start changing your habits, to start changing the way you shop. Okay. And if you notice, when you start shopping with this list in mind, that this is what you're going to include in your diet, you'll find that your shopping habits change, especially when we look at what we don't want to have in the child's diet. So, types of foods not to eat. These are the foods you don't want your child to eat. You want to either remove them completely or severely restrict them, or only eat them in moderation, or eat them when they're processed correctly. Number one, sugar. There are lots of studies on sugar and the effects of sugar on your immune system and your body in general. So when you have a child that you're trying to heal, you want to remove refined processed sugar. Vegetable oils. Vegetable oils that are on the market, vegetable oils, they're also known as cooking oils. You do not want to have this in your diet at all. Uh, Not for yourself, not for your child. So you want to replace the vegetable oils with the animal fats that we talked about previously, or you want to replace it with a good quality uh, vegetable seed or nut oil that you can find. But in any case, cooking oils and vegetable oils, you want to remove them. There are plenty of studies again out there that talk about the toxicity to the body that's caused by vegetable oils. So remove them completely. Table salt, and this is the regular white refined salt that you find in the grocery store. You want to again take that out, and we have it substitute, which is natural salts. All forms of processed foods. Why? Because processed foods generally have chemical preservatives and other things in it that you don't want to have in your body. Remember, one of our goals, one of our objectives of healing with food is to avoid harm. And when we eat processed food, there includes harms in those. Many processed foods contain sugar, vegetable oil, and salts and table salts in them. And that's not to mention the preservatives that they have in their dyes that they have in there, and so on. So you want to protect your child's body from these elements and remove all forms of processed food. One good way to know what, whether or not this is something that you should buy to eat or to have in your diet is if it is in a package. If it is packaged, leave it. Normally, this indicates that this is a processed food. Processed dairy, and this is dairy items that have been pasteurized or in some other way modified from its original state. We talked about raw milk and the things that we want to include. So we want to remove processed dairy from the diet as much as possible. And actually, for a lot of children who have these GAP issues, dairy is one of the foods that they're having a problem with, and it's processed dairy because the enzymes and the bacteria, natural enzymes that are in the milk have been killed off. So we want to avoid or remove processed dairy. And you might want to start with this. This is one of the foods that you could start with to see if you start seeing a change in your child. Processed meats, and these will be meats that are uh, essentially processed. So things like bologna, salami that you might find in the stores that are lunch meat, as we call them. So lunch meats, you want to avoid those. Grains. Now, if you're not trying to address any particular issue, you want to just eat better, have grains that are properly processed. So if you can sprout the grains, sprout them, soak them, wash them well, and eat in moderation, not nightly or daily, only in moderation. Okay, so uh, if you're just trying to eat better, you could possibly have grains in moderation. But when you're talking about implementing a healing diet, and this is what we're going to discuss, when you're talking about healing a child that has multiple symptoms of leaky gut, you want to remove grains altogether, all form of grains for a time period. And that time period is usually like a year and a half to 2 years, depending on how long it takes to get through the diet. But otherwise, if you're talking about just trying to improve your diet, you might want to be, you have a few grains every now and then. Juices and drinks. Okay, juices and drinks contain a lot of sugar, even if they are fruit juices. So if you don't remove them altogether, at least you want to limit them or only have them in moderation. And here also I'll make like to make a point about grains. And this will also include gluten-free products. because a lot of times people, when they try to implement a healing diet or they're trying to improve their diet, they turn from one ingredient that could be causing the problem to another ingredient that could also be causing a problem. So you find, for example, someone might be trying to stay away from grains or gluten or wheat, and then they turn to gluten-free products. Okay? A lot of these products are also heavily processed. So under your avoiding processed foods, it will require that you also not eat or not include these types of products that are made for alternative diets. Recovering Health with the GAPS Diet. And this is the GAPS book we see here on the right. I highly recommend that you purchase this book because it is a very good guide on how to heal with food, not only physical ailments, but also psychological issues as well. And a lot of the prescriptions that we're talking about are outlined in there. And it's easy to follow. So purchase the book as your starting point. Now, the GAPS diet was developed to reduce inflammation, support the gut lining, and restore the gut microbiome through dietary intervention and detoxification. And by microbiome here, we're talking about the bacteria that's available in your gut and should be there naturally in your digestive system. But a lot of the children that we find that have these issues that we're trying to deal with, either their physical issues like eczema, etc., or we're talking about psychological and learning difficulties like ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia. So, or we're talking about emotional instabilities, these types of things, autism as well, are all related to the diet and imbalance of bacteria that are in the. So the GAPS diet has two parts. There's the introduction diet and full GAPS. The introduction diet is designed for people with noticeable digestive and neurological issues, and it has 6 stages. So if you're dealing with a child that has many of the symptoms, and a lot of times this child, if you sit and observe this child and document or just make note of all of the things that's going on with this child, you'll find that they will have more than one issue. So for example, this child will have eczema. Along with the eczema, they'll have allergies. Along with that, you'll find that they have emotional instabilities, and they may have ADHD as well. So it becomes a compounded issue. Where do you want to start with this child? This child needs the introduction diet. Okay, the introduction diet has 6 stages, and at every stage, a new food or 2 or 3 new foods are added back in. And what we mean by added back in is because in stage 1, we start off with eliminating pretty much almost anything someone would eat. So we will start off with meat stocks along with the meat that we made the stock with. So we'll have the meat, we'll have the gelatinous soft tissue that comes with it, you have the fat, and you'll have soft vegetables that are cooked into what will be like a nice, rich soup. So this is what this child or anyone on this diet will be starting off with. And once if they're able to tolerate it, they're able to tolerate the stock with the vegetables, then we slowly add in things one by one or two by two, depending on what stage you're in. So when you're going through these stages, again, you would start off with stock, and then you would add eggs, apple, and then you would add ghee, and then you would add the olive oil and coconut oil. So you see, it's incremental. You stay. at a stage until you're sure that all of the foods that should be added in that stage are tolerated. But if you add a food and you get a reaction, they get diarrhea or some other behaviors start to come back, you know that they may not be tolerating well. If, let's say, for example, you add in another vegetable, for example, and all of a sudden you see diarrhea. So it might be that this item is not tolerated. So you look for different things. For example, with my son, when we got to the stage where we could add in nuts, and even with all the processing, soaking, sprouting, soaking, and then dehydrating, he couldn't tolerate the nuts. It gave him severe gas. So I knew then that he wasn't ready for the nuts. So we had to take the nuts back out, step back one stage, stay at that stage a little bit longer. So a lot of times people ask, how long are you supposed to stay at each stage? How long will you be on the introduction diet? It is highly individual. It depends on the person and how well they tolerate foods and how well their body is healing. Some people can go through the entire 6 stages in 6 weeks, and some people could take 6 months. So it really is dependent on the individual and their body. Now, the full GAPS diet is after the introduction. So once you get through all 6 stages, then you start adding back foods in. Of course, you do it slowly, but you start adding things that may have been taken out previously, based on a list of recommended foods that's provided by Dr. Natasha Campbell. So you start adding in more foods until you feel like you're eating normally, but you're still not eating everything because you're still not having grains, for example. So you would have most types of food, but not all. And it's not until you're leaving gaps that you will start adding in grains, for example. Of course, these grains, you want them to be processed correctly, fermented, for example. Um, but you stay on full gap until you have no symptoms, no diarrhea, no bloating from foods that are included in this list. So after full gaps, then you would transition into eating like you normally would. And for many people, this could be a year and a half to 2 years. Now, it's important to note here that GAPS isn't a forever diet, okay? But after you finish with GAPS, you still want to retain some of those good practices that you picked up while doing the diet. And that goes back to the list of what you want to include in your diet on a regular basis and what you do not want to include in your diet on a regular basis. Okay? And so, with that, I have some reminders for you when you want to start the GAP diet for healing purposes. These are some things that you want to consider. Number one, you are treating an ill child or ill children. This is important to remember and to keep in mind because uh, it may, um, there's a particular mindset that you might have that um, going on a elimination diet is extreme. You have to think of the foods that you're including in this diet or taking away from the diet as the medication for this child. So let's say, for example, if you took the child to a doctor and they gave you a prescription medicine and said, take this medicine for 7 days, are you going to say, well, 7 days is just too long. That's just too much. 3 times a day, I don't think I'm going to do that. Maybe I'll give it to him 1 or 2 days, and then after that, I'm just not going to do it. Or would you finish that prescription the way the doctor advised to make sure that that illness is taken care of and is in a such and the child is in such a state that it doesn't return? This is how we have to think of our food and the diet that we're trying to implement. You have to stick with this diet as closely as you possibly can in order to treat this ill child. Because remember, we're treating an illness, even if we can't see it, or even if it's an illness that maybe not so bad, you can live with it and manage the symptoms, for example. But in reality, you are treating a child that is sick. And we have to say that to ourselves. This child is sick, and therefore we're using the food as prescription medicine to heal this child by Allah's permission or by Allah's will. Because if we don't have this mentality, it's easy to quit. It's easy to say, okay, this is getting a little bit difficult. I'm just going to go back to eating the way we were eating before. But if you do that, that is akin to stopping the prescription early, or giving a sick person something that will compromise their condition further. So remember, this child is sick and you're medicating, but your medicine is food. Monitor your mindset, and in particular, your mindset about food. And it will make a difference how you feel about food. Because if you don't like the thing that the child needs to eat, that is going to come off in how you implement the diet. Let's say, for example, organ meats. Organ meats are a prescription or a part of this healing diet. If you feel that organ meats are disgusting, then that mindset is going to trickle into how you implement the diet. You might not want to feed it to your child. You might refuse to even buy it or cook it. So you have to monitor your own mindset. If you find that you can't eat the soft parts of the meat, or you find that the gelatinous parts that are at the end of the bone disgusting, that's going to come off in how you cook, how you serve, how you approach it. You might feel within yourself that I can't even serve this because I don't like it. I don't like feeding my child food that I wouldn't eat. So you have to monitor your own mindset and adjust it, because it's going to affect how you implement the diet. Model what you want to see. Now, this whole time we're talking about a diet for a child to help a child heal, to have better health. But in reality, we have to model this behavior that we want to see from the child. So if we want this child to eat a nice bowl of soup, then we should sit with that child and eat the same bowl of soup. Why? Because our children, especially young ones, they do what they see us do. So it actually becomes more difficult if you sit this child down to a bowl of soup while you have a large plate of everything she likes to eat but can't right now in front of her, and you're eating that. It's going to be far less effective if you're sitting there eating that and say, oh, but that's your food, you eat that. Okay. Another tip is it's easier if you do the diet together. Okay. Because if you try to separate, well, this is the sick child, so I'm going to have the sick child's diet, and this is for the rest of us that aren't doing the diet, then you have a split. So it is actually more cohesive if you all do it together. okay? And the results actually turn out better. You have less conflicts with the child if you model what you want them to do. Include the child in the process. We don't want the child to feel like this new diet is something that is being done to them. So include them so it is done with them. Have discussions with them, especially those that are older and can understand. You'd be surprised at how much a child can understand uh, about their own bodies, about healing, about feeling better. And these are all discussions that you want to have with your child. Help them understand what they're going through, help them understand their illness, and help them understand how eating this way will help them manage or recover from this illness. So have conversations with them, explain to them what you're doing and what you're trying to do. Especially, of course, it would be good that you do it as a family and not just one individual or two individuals in the family. Include them in the process of cooking. We have a culture and in these times where we tend to put kids out of the kitchen and cook while they're playing or so on. Bring them in, let them see the new foods that you're introducing. Have them help you prepare them. When a child is included, they take ownership over it. And then it becomes easy for them to eat these new foods. So if you're making a ferment, for example, have that child mix in the salt and mix it up and have them be with you as you go through the process. Have them crush up or add the spices to the ferment and let them watch and see how it goes through the process. And when it finishes, they will actually be excited to taste it versus feeling like this is something yucky, it's sour, I don't like it. Have them go through the process with you, and it will be much easier to get them on board. Do what you can. Now, when you start going through the research and um, seeing how other people implement, seeing other people's meals, knowing what's ideal versus what you have access to, this may cause you to feel like you have to do what you don't have the capacity to do. Instead, do what you can. We talked about earlier ideal foods, grass fed and free range meats and organic vegetables and so on. It might be that you can't do all of that. Do what you can. Don't allow what you can't do to stop you from moving forward. Okay? Find a way. Not everything is straightforward. You might have to find an alternative way. You might have to just wait. In my case, at the time when I did GAPS the first time, I didn't have access to uh, eggs, free range eggs, uh, or meat, or grass fed meats, for example. Couldn't find those things and could not find at the time raw milk. I didn't have access to it. So I just chose to not have dairy until we could get access to the raw milk. So again, do what you can. Of course, you want to do the best that you can, but only do what you can. Don't let your limitations stop you. Start slowly. Some of us want to, in our excitement and our zeal, we want to just jump right in it and go headlong 100%. This could actually make things more difficult for you down the road because in this healing process can be a long one. Okay, so start slowly. Make sure that you understand what you're doing and understand what could happen at each stage, what kind of reactions you could have. So when you take things slowly, it allows you to be able to monitor where you are. instead of becoming overwhelmed or shocked, and then you have to backtrack and relearn and ask questions or ask more questions, try to do your research and understand the process before you jump into each phase. So just know where you're going before you go there. So start slowly. Be conscious of what you're doing. And again, know what you're doing. Sometimes, again, we just start something because we're excited about it. Maybe our friends are doing it. It's the solution we've been looking for, and we just kind of jump into it. But then sometime down the road, it's like, well, what am I supposed to be doing now? Or what's next? Or, oh, what am I? And you kind of are not conscious. It's just, you're just doing something. Okay. No, you have to be conscious. You have to be aware of every step of the process. You have to be aware, literally, of every plate of food and every bowl of soup that's being served. So you have to be present in that action so that you can journal or uh, keep notes and track what's happening with your child. So let's say, for example, you have eliminated much foods and then you add a food, and all of a sudden your child is having screaming fits, but you can't remember that you added this new food, and now you're wondering what happened, what's wrong with it, what's going on. I feel like we're losing, and you have to be conscious. Be conscious of, okay, wait, what's happening? I added a new food and now I see this reaction. Okay, let's take out this new food. And sometimes you need someone there to help you talk through this. Okay, so um, this is a point I'm going to talk to him about in a few. But in any case, be there, be in moment, and be conscious of what you're doing. Stay focused on the goal. Remember, we talked earlier about the goal of implementing this diet. Why are you doing it? So stay focused on that goal. It could take a while in order for you to see the effects of that goal. Okay. The full scope of that goal. So you have to stay focused on it. And there will be times where it is tough. And I'm going to just go ahead and say that it's not all easy. It's not all rosy. There will be times when it's tough, but you have to remind yourself of that end goal. What is the goal that you're trying to reach? And so that keeps you pushing forward and moving forward until you get to that goal. Um, I'm going to share a little bit with you, and this might be a little bit TMI, but I hope you accept it. With my child, one of a major indicator that he was having a physical problem with his stool. His stool was abnormal. It was white, floaty, feathery, and that was an indicator of issues that are happening in his digestive system that could have turned into chronic illness. Well, it took a little longer than 3 years, and I guess there was a gap there, but it took about 3 years for him to announce to me that he had a normal brown stool. Now, we had a lot of successes, a lot of successes throughout that time. So I could see incrementally that this was working. It was working well. I really, literally felt like I got my child back. But that one indicator was an amazing moment that he literally came to tell me. And this is how I know he came to tell me, look, Mom, my stool is like this. He came to tell me. And partially is that he understood what we were looking for. Okay, so you have to stay focused on the goal so that you can go the long haul, inshallah. And then get support. Get support for implementing this diet. Um, the diet is essentially designed so that you can do it by yourself. But emotionally and socially, it helps to have someone in your corner. It helps to have a network of people that you can talk to and to share ideas with. Just ask, what can I make for breakfast this morning? That type of thing. So, yes, you should be able to implement the diet by yourself. However, it helps to have a network and a support system in place when you're doing. Okay, and with that, I'm going to conclude this session. Thank you for giving me your time, and I hope to offer a getting started with GAPS session. If you're interested in that, please get in contact with me as at info@tessellate.me, on Tessa at Instagram at Tessellate AE, and then you can find us at Facebook at Tessellate Mosaics of Development, and on LinkedIn as well. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك